Have you ever noticed how the harder you chase love, the faster it runs? Like trying to catch your reflection in water. The more you reach, the more it disappears. Maybe you've been there, staring at your phone, waiting for a reply that never comes. Replaying conversations, wondering what you said wrong. Silently convincing yourself that if you try just a little harder, maybe, just maybe, they'll see your worth. But here's a question that might just change everything. What if the thing that's pushing them away is your need to hold on? In a world that glorifies pursuit, that tells us to text back faster, love harder, prove our value louder. What if the real power lies in letting go? Not in apathy, not in bitterness, but in a quiet kind of confidence. A stillness that says, I am whole, with or without you. This isn't about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about something deeper, something the ancient Stoics understood long before dating apps and read receipts ever existed. They called it apatheia, freedom from unhealthy passions. Not suppression, but sovereignty. And today, we're going to explore how that same ancient mindset can transform the way you experience modern love. Because detachment, when practiced with awareness, isn't cold, it's clarity. It doesn't numb you, it refines you. It's not a wall to keep love out. It's a boundary to keep your peace in. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. People don't just notice your absence, they respect your presence. This video isn't about quick tips or manipulation. It's an invitation to rethink the way you love, to reclaim your power in relationships, and most importantly, to reconnect with the part of you that doesn't vanish when someone else leaves. So whether you're healing from heartbreak, struggling with anxious attachment, or simply curious about how to become more grounded in love, this is for you. Today, we'll dive deep into the unexpected benefits of detachment in dating, drawing from Stoic philosophy, modern psychology, and raw, human experience. And if any part of this resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in trying to keep someone else, then you're in the right place. If this message finds a quiet truth inside you, I'd be honored if you'd like this video, subscribe to Stoic now, and leave a comment about your own journey. Your voice matters here. Now, take a deep breath. Let's begin the journey inward, where real attraction and real peace begins. Number 1. What detachment in dating truly means. Imagine holding a delicate flame in your hands. It glows warmly, flickering with beauty. But the more tightly you try to grasp it, the more it dims and retreats, struggling for air. Love, especially in its early, fragile form, often behaves the same way. The desire to possess, to guarantee, to control, slowly suffocates the very thing we long to nourish. This is where detachment reveals itself not as indifference, but as a breath of oxygen, space that allows the flame to dance, to grow on its own terms. Too often, people hear the word detachment and recoil. They picture coldness, apathy, emotional walls. But in truth, detachment isn't the absence of love. It's the absence of fear. Fear of being left. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if we don't grip tightly, it will all slip away. What detachment asks us to do is simple, but not easy. To loosen the hand, not the heart. To love someone, while still standing firmly in your own life. To open your arms, not to cling, but to offer space where freedom and affection coexist. Detachment means showing up fully, without the hunger to be completed by someone else. It's the power to say, I choose you, but I don't need you to choose me back in order to feel whole. And that distinction between choosing and needing is everything. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. In dating, we often tie our worth to the response of the other person. We wait on texts like they're proof of our value. We bend our truth just to be accepted. We abandon our own center for a sliver of attention. But what would it look like to revoke that illusion? To remove the weight we've placed on someone else's hands and return it to our own? Detachment doesn't ask you to love less. It asks you to love differently. Not like someone starving for affection, but like someone who already dines at the banquet of their own soul. In practice, detachment means embracing the reality that nothing, not even the most passionate connection, is ever truly in your control. You cannot control who texts back. You cannot force chemistry. You cannot demand loyalty, but you can control how you show up. You can choose to remain aligned with your integrity. You can root yourself so deeply in self-respect that whether they stay or go, you remain intact. This is not the passive, distant kind of love many fear. It's active. It's generous. It's just not needy. It's being willing to love someone without becoming addicted to them. To see their beauty clearly, without losing sight of your own. It's whispering, "I care for you deeply," while knowing that your world will not collapse if they walk away. Because detachment doesn't disconnect you from others, it reconnects you to yourself. Picture someone you admire, someone with quiet presence. Maybe it's a mentor, a friend, or even a fictional character. You'll often find that what draws you to them isn't their neediness or their pursuit. It's their centeredness, their calm, their sense of self. People are drawn to those who are anchored, not those who chase. Detachment, then, is not an obstacle to intimacy. It's the soil where intimacy grows best. When you no longer seek to extract identity or validation from your partner, you create space for a relationship that's not based on performance or anxiety. You replace fear with freedom, obligation with choice, pressure with presence. And yes, this takes practice, especially if you've been conditioned to equate love with control, to confuse closeness with constant access. But the truth is, deep connection doesn't need to be monitored or micromanaged. It breathes. It ebbs and flows. And when two people approach each other from a place of wholeness, not deficiency, that connection becomes sacred, not strained. So when we speak of detachment in dating, we are not speaking of withdrawal. We are speaking of wisdom. The wisdom to trust that what's real won't need to be chased. The wisdom to release the fantasy that love is owed to you if you do everything right. The wisdom to walk away if staying means abandoning yourself. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And detachment is an act of bravery. It's the refusal to compromise your peace for temporary pleasure. It's standing tall in your truth, even when your heart longs to kneel. In that stillness, in that quiet restraint, you begin to realize something. You were never asking for love. You were asking for permission to love yourself fully, with or without them. And that permission, you don't have to wait for anyone to give it. You can claim it, right here, right now. So what is detachment in dating? It's the art of holding hands without losing grip on your own soul. It's the balance of openness and sovereignty. It's where real love begins, not from desperation, but from depth. And when you embrace this way of being, something changes, not just in how others respond to you, but in how you see yourself. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention. You stop grasping, and you start radiating. And in that glow, you no longer beg to be chosen. You become the one who chooses, with peace, with clarity, and with strength. Number 2, the psychology behind detachment. There's something quietly powerful about someone who doesn't chase. A calmness that makes you pause. A presence that feels complete, with or without your approval. You feel it, even before you understand it. That quiet confidence, that emotional stillness. It draws you in without asking. It makes you wonder, why do I keep thinking about them? That is detachment in motion, not a cold shoulder, not a game, but a deep, psychological pattern rooted in how our minds crave mystery, freedom, and challenge. Modern neuroscience tells us this. The brain is wired for anticipation, not gratification. It's not the moment we get what we want that excites us. It's the moment before. It's the pursuit, the waiting, the wondering. Dopamine, the chemical that fuels desire, surges when outcomes are uncertain, when we're not quite sure what's coming next. This is why the person who texts instantly, replies at midnight, and never makes us wait often fades into the background. Not because they're unkind, but because our minds no longer feel a reason to pay attention. The more we have of something, the less we value it. And love, though deep and sacred, is no exception to this psychological law. So when someone practices detachment, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of internal balance, they break the loop. They stop feeding the cycle of overavailability and emotional urgency. And suddenly, the other person feels something unexpected, curiosity. This curiosity is the gateway to attraction. In psychology, it's called reactance. When people feel their autonomy is being threatened, they pull away. But when you remove the pressure, when you stop clinging to outcomes or chasing validation, you do something rare. You restore their freedom. And with that freedom, attraction is reborn, not forced, but invited. Now, some might say, isn't that manipulative? Withholding to get a reaction? And the answer is no, because real detachment isn't pretending. It's not needing. It's not faking calm while internally falling apart. It's learning to soothe the part of you that once panicked at silence and replacing that panic with presence. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And few things are more outside our control than how someone else feels about us." So when you stop trying to control that, when you release the urge to impress, prove, or please, you begin to feel something shift. You don't lose power. You gain it. You become magnetic, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've become hard to shake. This psychological shift is often most visible in people with anxious attachment styles, those who overgive, overtext, overthink. Their fear of losing someone drives them to hold tighter. But the tighter they hold, the faster the connection suffocates. Detachment interrupts this cycle. It teaches you to pause before pressing send, to wait before reacting, to breathe before explaining yourself again. And in those pauses, you return to yourself. You build emotional resilience. You learn that even if someone pulls away, you do not dissolve. And here lies the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be unforgettable, you become impossible to ignore. Because people are not drawn to need. They are drawn to energy, to centeredness, to someone who walks through life like a mountain, not shaken by passing winds, not desperate for attention, but deeply rooted in who they are. When you show up with that energy, you stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I feel proud of who I'm being right now?" That shift doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how they see you. You become a mirror, reflecting their longing for inner peace. You become rare, and in a world addicted to noise, rarity is irresistible. So yes, detachment works, but not because it tricks anyone. It works because it returns you to your natural state of dignity, of ease, of not chasing anything except your own peace. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." Detachment is that digging, a returning inward, a decision to love not from emptiness, but from fullness. And when you reach that place, when your love becomes an offering, not a plea, others feel it. They lean in, not because you begged, but because your silence spoke louder than their noise. That is the psychology. That is the paradox. And that is your power. Number 3, how detachment builds self-worth. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop chasing. You start remembering who you are. When you stop bending yourself to fit into someone else's story, you begin writing your own. And slowly, steadily, detachment stops being a strategy to deal with others and becomes a sanctuary where you finally meet yourself. Because here's the truth we often overlook. Our value isn't lost in someone's rejection. It's forgotten in our own pursuit. Every time we ignore our needs to be chosen, every time we shrink our voice to maintain peace, every time we wait for a reply to feel worthy, we chip away at our self-respect. Not because someone took it, but because we handed it over, believing that their attention was worth more than our inner clarity. But detachment? Detachment is the quiet rebellion against that lie. It is not a defense mechanism. It is a soul mechanism, a way of recentering your worth where it always belonged, in your own hands. When you practice detachment, you begin to see things differently. The silence that once felt like rejection starts to feel like freedom. The distance that once felt unbearable becomes sacred space for reflection. You no longer take someone's absence as proof that you are not enough. You begin to understand that their actions are mirrors of their own journey, not verdicts on yours. And in that understanding, something ancient awakens. Self-worth not built on being wanted, but on being whole. Epictetus reminds us, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. But how often do we reverse that? We adorn first. We dress ourselves in opinions, attention, aesthetics, and only look inward when those things crumble. But detachment turns that process inside out. It strips away the noise so you can hear your own voice. It clears the fog of desire so you can see your own reflection. This is not an overnight transformation. It's a return, a coming home, and it begins in the smallest of moments. The moment you decide not to double text, not because of pride, but because you trust that you are already enough. The moment you speak your boundary calmly, not to push someone away, but to protect the peace you've worked so hard to cultivate. The moment you no longer ask, why didn't they choose me, but instead wonder, why was I waiting for them to decide my value? Each of these moments builds something, a new foundation. Brick by brick, word by word, silence by silence, you become your own center of gravity. Detachment teaches you that it is not your job to be desired by everyone. It is your calling to be loyal to your own soul. And when you live from that place, when your choices reflect self-respect rather than fear, you no longer attract relationships that drain you. You attract ones that reflect you, because people treat you the way you treat yourself in their absence. If you abandon yourself when someone else pulls away, you teach them that your worth is flexible. But if you remain rooted, calm, kind, steady, you teach them that your love is sacred, not for negotiation. Seneca once said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." The friction of detachment is real. It tests your patience. It tests your ego. It tests the part of you that still wants to be saved by someone else's attention. But every time you choose self-sovereignty over self-sabotage, your light gets sharper. Your path gets clearer, and you stop chasing mirrors that only reflect your wounds. You begin to look for mirrors that reflect your growth. And more importantly, you become one. People feel it. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you no longer flinch when love feels uncertain. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care for the one person you'd forgotten for too long, yourself. Detachment becomes a kind of sacred defiance, not against love, but against the idea that you must suffer to keep it. You realize your peace is no longer a reward. It is your responsibility. Your worth is no longer earned through their validation. It is remembered through your stillness. And when someone enters your life, they do not complete you. They accompany you. You no longer collapse into their attention. You expand within your own. That expansion, that slow and steady rebuilding of self, is the true gift of detachment. And it changes everything, not just in how others see you, but in how you see the world. You stop grasping at what slips away. You start becoming what stays. And what stays? Your breath, your presence, your power. That is the worth no one can give you and no one can take. Number 4, techniques to practice detachment. Detachment, like any form of wisdom, doesn't just arrive. It's cultivated, not through grand declarations, but through small, consistent choices, day by day, moment by moment. It's not something you learn once. It's something you practice until it becomes your way of being. Because truthfully, when emotion swells, logic hides. When love feels uncertain, the old self wants to take over, to text, to explain, to fix, to plead. That's not weakness. That's conditioning. And detachment offers a way out, not by rejecting those feelings, but by redirecting their energy. So how do you practice detachment? Not as a cold mask, but as a warm discipline. You begin with awareness. The first and most vital practice is a simple, stoic pause. Before you reach out, ask yourself, am I acting from peace or from fear? This one question, when asked with honesty, reveals your motive. If you're texting because you're calm and connected, that's fine. But if you're reaching out to fill silence, to regain control, to seek proof that you matter, pause. Create space between urge and action. That space is where your power lives. Another powerful technique is what I call the 3-day rule. Whenever you feel the panic to act, to fix a dynamic, to send that long emotional message, wait 3 days. Let your nervous system cool. Let clarity return. If after 3 days your truth remains, speak it calmly. But more often than not, time rewrites urgency into insight. What felt like a crisis becomes a footnote. What felt like abandonment becomes redirection. This delay isn't about suppressing feeling. It's about stewarding it. Because urgency often distorts truth, and detachment is truth's most loyal companion. Another essential practice is intentional journaling. Not the kind where you simply vent, but where you analyze. Use it to explore questions like, what am I making this situation mean about me? What unmet need is being activated right now? What does my higher self want to do, not my wounded self? Write not to complain, but to clarify. Marcus Aurelius journaled daily, not to document events, but to discipline his mind, to remind himself of what mattered, what was his and what was not. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this. and you will find strength. Journaling reveals this inner power. Over time, it rewires the lens through which you see love, not as a test of your worth, but as a reflection of your state. Detachment also requires that you set internal goals, not external ones. Don't measure success by whether they text you back or fall in love. Measure it by how well you stayed true to yourself. Did you speak with grace? Did you act with alignment? Did you protect your energy? These are goals no one can take from you. One technique that supports this is the daily self-check-in. At the start and end of each day, ask, where did I give my power away? Where did I choose peace over panic? What am I proud of today? These simple reflections build emotional momentum. They keep you grounded in progress, not perfection. Another essential tool, micro-boundaries. Often, detachment isn't about walking away. It's about making tiny, self-honoring decisions. Like not responding immediately when you're emotionally triggered. Like choosing not to explain yourself again to someone who keeps misunderstanding you. Like choosing silence not as punishment, but as protection. These are acts of self-loyalty. They signal to your nervous system, you are safe. You don't have to beg. You don't have to prove. Detachment also grows through environmental curation. What you consume affects how you attach. Limit content that fuels anxiety, constant relationship reels, romanticized chaos, false urgency. Instead, read philosophy. Study your mind. Surround yourself with voices that remind you. Your worth is internal, not transactional. And lastly, commit to one non-negotiable habit that grounds you in your own identity, whether that's meditation, morning walks, gym sessions, or breath work. This isn't about productivity. It's about remembering you are a whole person with a full life, even when love feels uncertain. Seneca wrote, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." Detachment is the tale you tell yourself about your own life. It's the voice that says, even if they leave, I stay. I stay with me. Because the more you practice this, the more your nervous system stops bracing for abandonment. The more your mind stops mistaking attention for love. The more your soul begins to trust. Love can be offered without being forfeited. And this isn't just mental hygiene. It's spiritual armor. Because when you live this way, you don't just change how you love, you change what kind of love you accept. You no longer settle for presence wrapped in pressure. You begin to attract what meets your stillness with stillness. Not chaos, not control, but clarity. That clarity becomes your compass. And even if the world pulls at you, tempting you back into need, into fear, you'll return to center more quickly. Because you've trained yourself. You've practiced. You've remembered. You are not a puppet of craving. You are a keeper of peace. And that peace is worth more than anything that costs your soul to obtain. Number 5, detachment during breakups or ghosting. There's a silence that lingers after someone leaves, not just in the air, but inside you. It's the kind of silence that echoes, that loops, that makes you question what was real and what was just wishful thinking. And when that departure comes without explanation, when they ghost you, vanish mid-conversation, or slowly fade into a mist of unread messages, your mind spins. You replay the last words. You scan for clues. You wonder if maybe you were too much or not enough. But here's the truth the Stoics would whisper into that hollow space. It is not what they did that causes your suffering. It is what you tell yourself about what they did. Breakups and ghosting are not just about loss. They are about meaning. And detachment is what helps you reclaim the pen before your mind writes a story that wounds you deeper than the event itself ever could. Because if someone leaves you without a word, the instinct is to chase clarity. We reach out, not for closure, but for relief. We believe if they just said why, the ache might soften. But often, they don't say why. Or their reasons are vague, inconsistent, hollow. And the silence becomes its own kind of cruelty. This is where detachment isn't just helpful, it's healing. Detachment allows you to sit with the discomfort without collapsing into it. It lets you observe the pain without turning it into identity. Instead of thinking, they disappeared because I wasn't enough, detachment allows you to think, they disappeared because they weren't capable of depth. That shift is everything. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. That doesn't mean you numb yourself. It means you choose your interpretation. You honor your feelings without letting them decide your future. So how do you apply detachment in the aftermath of heartbreak? You begin by creating sacred space. Stop searching their socials. Stop rereading the old messages. Every revisit is a re-injury. Detachment here means removing the hooks that keep reopening the wound. It doesn't mean forgetting them. It means prioritizing your own peace above your obsession with understanding them. Because you don't need every answer to heal. You need inner stillness. You need to return to what is real, your breath, your body, your path. Detachment also teaches you that your grief deserves space, but not the steering wheel. Let it walk beside you, not lead you. Cry, journal, scream into a pillow if you must, but then return to yourself. Return to routines, to purpose, to discipline. The Stoics saw grief not as a flaw, but as a season. They allowed it, but did not serve it. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance." Detachment in the face of pain isn't passive. It is a daily choice to rise without bitterness, to feel the ache without building a home in it. Ghosting, especially, wounds the ego. It triggers the deepest fears of invisibility. It makes you feel like a ghost yourself, haunting someone who no longer acknowledges your presence. But here's what detachment helps you see. Their silence is not about you. It is about their capacity. Their avoidance is a mirror of their limitations, not your worth. When someone ghosts you, they are telling you something with absolute clarity, even if not in words. And the most self-respecting response is to believe them, to accept the truth their absence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. That acceptance is where healing begins. Detachment doesn't mean you don't miss them. It means you don't beg them to return. It means you hold space for both the pain and the dignity. You grieve without groveling. You reflect without chasing. You close the door not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop waiting outside one that will never open again. And here's the quiet gift hidden inside heartbreak. Once the storm passes and the noise fades, you hear yourself more clearly than ever before. You realize how much of your identity was wrapped around being chosen. You realize how deeply you wanted their presence to validate your existence. And then, like dawn after a long night, you remember. You are still here. You are still breathing. And no one has the power to take that light from you, unless you give it. Epictetus taught us that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So react like the person you're becoming, not the person who's breaking. Choose response over reaction. Choose grace over groveling. Choose the long road of healing over the short hit of temporary attention. Because sometimes their silence is the closure, and your silence becomes your strength. This is the kind of detachment that liberates. It doesn't harden you. It softens you back into your own soul. It reminds you that your worth was never theirs to affirm or erase. You are not what they abandoned. You are what survives it. And from that place, you begin again, not weaker, but wiser. Not guarded, but guided. Not empty, but finally whole. Number 6. How detachment strengthens the right bond and burns off the wrong one. There's a calm that arrives when you stop trying to control the story. A peace that comes when you realize, if something is right, it will not require you to constantly sacrifice your dignity to keep it alive. This is the gift of detachment in relationships. It doesn't just protect you, it purifies the connection. It filters the false from the true. And whether it draws someone closer or reveals their exit, it always serves you. See, most of us are taught to confuse attachment with love. We're taught that if we care, we must constantly prove it, through attention, through over-explaining, through the subtle self-abandonment of never saying no. But when you're attached, you're not present. You're performing. You're holding on so tightly to the hope of keeping them. You stop noticing whether the bond even feeds your soul. Detachment says, let's find out who stays when I stop begging. Let's see what remains when I return to my center. This is not coldness. It's clarity. And clarity doesn't destroy love, it refines it. When you practice detachment, you stop managing another person's perception of you. You start showing up honestly. You say what you mean, without fear of losing them. You stop trying to be agreeable at the cost of authenticity. And when you do this, one of two things happens. They either step closer, feeling relieved by your self-trust, or they pull away, realizing they were only staying because you were willing to bend. Either way, you win. Because the wrong ones leave, and that's not your loss. That's your liberation. Detachment is the great revealer. It shows you who loves you for you, not for your compliance. It reveals which connections are rooted in mutual growth and which are fueled by emotional dependency. And when you attract someone from this space, not because you need them, but because you see them, the relationship is different. It breathes. It's not a contract of neediness, but a communion of wholeness. There's no more chasing. No more measuring love by how quickly they text back or how tightly they hold on. The bond becomes stronger, not because you're forcing it, but because you're finally allowing it to form on truth. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "That which is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." The health of any relationship mirrors the health of its individuals. If one is constantly pouring while the other only takes, the imbalance creates silent resentment. Detachment corrects that imbalance. It invites reciprocity. In a relationship touched by detachment, love becomes a gift, not a grip. You can give without fear because you know you'll survive if it's not returned. You can receive without guilt because you're not afraid of being indebted. The emotional air becomes breathable. Each person is allowed to be a self, not a project, not a rescuer, not a savior. This kind of love lasts longer because it doesn't come from fear. It's not a reaction to loneliness. It's not a medication for inner wounds. It's two whole people choosing freely, daily, to walk beside each other. And when it's not right, detachment shows you quickly. It prevents the months of overthinking, the years of trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. It silences the question, maybe if I change, and replaces it with, maybe this isn't mine to carry. Because true connection doesn't demand your silence. It doesn't punish your boundaries. It doesn't wilt when you stop pleasing. It deepens. It matures. It welcomes the truth, even when it's inconvenient. That's the paradox. Detachment makes you safer to love. Because you are no longer threatening to disappear into the relationship. You are no longer there to be completed. You are there to share. And in that sharing, love stops feeling like a task and starts feeling like a return. Seneca taught, "He who is brave is free." And bravery in love looks like this: letting go of what drains you, even when it's familiar. Saying no to crumbs, even when you're starving. Staying with yourself, even when the silence is deafening. That kind of courage builds relationships that are real, and it burns off the ones that never were. So if someone leaves when you detach, bless them. They were never anchored enough to meet you at the level of your wholeness. And if someone stays, drawn not by your chasing, but by your calm, that's someone worth knowing. Because they didn't choose you because you begged. They chose you because you were becoming. And becoming is what makes love eternal. In the end, detachment isn't about distance, it's about depth. It's not about building walls to keep people out. It's about building roots so deep within yourself, no one can shake your ground. We began this journey with a simple but piercing truth. The more you chase, the more love seems to slip away. But through each layer we've uncovered, we've come to see detachment is not rejection. It is reverence. It is the sacred act of protecting your peace, your presence, and your power without apology. When you stop overgiving, people begin to see your value. When you stop explaining, your silence speaks volumes. When you stop needing love to validate your worth, you finally become worthy in your own eyes. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And if your thoughts are always wrapped around anxiety, obsession, fear of losing someone, you begin to fade. But when your thoughts return to stillness, to self-respect, to the quiet strength of letting things unfold without force, your soul starts to glow again. You've now seen how detachment rewires the brain, how it breaks addictive patterns of overattachment, how it reveals the truth of any relationship by simply stepping back and watching what remains. You've learned to ask better questions. Not, how do I get them to stay? But, do I like who I am when I'm with them? Not, why are they ignoring me? But, why do I ignore myself to be seen by them? These are not easy questions. They're not meant to be. But they're the kind of questions that shape a life worth living, a love worth waiting for, a self worth coming home to. And perhaps that's the greatest gift detachment offers. Not just healthier relationships, but a restored relationship with yourself. You stop orbiting around others. You become the sun again. You radiate from within. You draw people in not with noise, but with gravity. And those who belong to your life will stay, not because you begged, but because your stillness reminded them of their own. So if you're watching this and your heart is heavy with silence, If you're somewhere between letting go and holding on, take this moment to return to yourself. Breathe. Ground your energy. Reclaim your center. You are not the love that left. You are the strength that remains. If this message resonated with your journey, if even a small part of this helped you stand taller, speak softer, or breathe deeper, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the Stoic Now channel, and share your story in the comments. Your voice could be the reflection someone else needs tonight. You are not alone on this path. We walk it together. Quiet, certain, free, and in the stillness, we remember. We don't lose ourselves by letting go. We find ourselves there. Until next time, hold your peace close, and let the rest fall as it must.